Hello everybody, and welcome to day 25 of 28 days to master level chess tactics. We are on the second day covering clearance. And in this video, I'm going to give you one position and we're going to go really deep. Basically, I'm going to give you two prompts, two opportunities within the middle of the position to solve. And let's just start. So this is white to move, and you can pause the video now. Alright, so this position is actually from a game that was played in 1980 between Mikhail Tal as white and Boris Spassky. It's very interesting because it is tactically complicated, but it gives you a perfect example of clearance and multiple ideas also in a combination involving clearance. Alright, so let's start with the evaluation. So basically, materials equal. Both white and black have 6 pawns. There's 3 minor pieces, 2 rooks, queens, but basically the position of the black's pieces is a little discoordinated. Notice that these 2 pawns in the center here basically block the light square bishop, and even if this knight comes to c5, it doesn't really do much. Even if it's hitting e4, it's well protected, and white is ready to basically start a kingside attack. Now, black does have this A file, so you need to keep that in mind, but at this point in time, it's inconsequential given the activity of white's pieces. Alright, so there's multiple moves here, but the one that should jump out at you, of course, when you're looking at a kingside attack, is knight takes h5. Now, this is a very logical sacrifice because the bishop could go here. If the queen moves, you could play something like e5. But otherwise, there's really not that many squares for your pieces to get in, and it's kind of aching for something to be done to break through with white's activity. All right, so knight takes h5, pawn takes, and now the next logical move would be rook to f5, hitting the queen. Now, the queen basically has 2 moves. It can either go back, reducing its activity and allowing you to just basically continue your attack, or it could go to g3. Now, if the queen goes to g3, then actually it looks like you get a queen trap because you would play rook from 1 to f3, and it doesn't have any squares. And you should always see these kind of checks. The rook can come in on a1, but white would just play bishop to d1. All right, let's play that line. So queen to g3, you play here. And now if the rook checked, then you would just play bishop to d1. And I guess you would have to sack. And it looks like you just trapped the queen, so that's not going to work. All right, so that doesn't happen in the game. The queen does go back, and then we just see e5. Another brilliant move, and let's go back a move. All right, so I mentioned e5 earlier, and it's actually a very logical move because another example of pawns not being the soul of chess. So notice that this piece is pretty inactive, and the sole reason for that is because it has the light square pawns just sitting in the way. Now, sometimes the way to activate your pieces the best is not necessarily to move them, but it's actually to push your pawns or sacrifice a pawn to clear a diagonal or a line, and in this case, a diagonal. So e5 makes perfect sense. Now, black was going to blockade that square anyway with knight to e5 or something like that, even bishop to e5 or pawn takes. Either way, basically, the e5 square is controlled by black, and giving away a pawn, instead of relying on it being blockaded, now he has this diagonal that's also cutting on to h7. All right, so the rooks are completely active. The rook's ready to come in even on 1 and g3. The bishop and the queen are very active, and now the last piece, which is the light square bishop, is active. So let's see what happens. Pawn takes. He's just trying to cut in the defenses. And now, actually, a weakness of this pawn move is the next move after here, and then d6. Now notice, of course, again, an example of pawns not being the soul of chess. The reason for d6 is to cut off the coordination of the black rook, of course, from this kingside attack, because he was very desperate to swing this rook over to something like g6 or to control this h6 square. All right, so now Spassky is trying to give some space for his king. And this is the final position that you can pause and just think about what you would do in this position. There's a very crushing move, and there's only one move, so you can pause the video now. All right, so the move, in case you didn't see it, is rook to g5. Now, of course, the pawn can take, but the queen comes in, and he would actually get a pretty quick mate. Let's actually calculate that here. So if he takes, then the queen comes. It's a mate in 3. Well, the computer's saying to bring your queen in, but I would think it would be more logical to go here, check, and then you just checkmate right here. All right, so of course that doesn't happen in the game. Checkmate in 3. He just goes over. Now, of course, if he goes back, then there's going to be some problems as well. He could just bring the bishop in, threaten the queen, and then take. Or he could just go for something like rook to g6, and he's threatening checkmate, which looks pretty unstoppable. So he just allows his queen basically to be skewered. And at this point, I would say it's completely won. You could just take, and then you're up queen versus 2 minor pieces, and you should evaluate this position as won. Of course, this is a Mikhail Tal game, so he kind of makes it complicated. He checks. He goes. The reason he goes queen to d1 was he was trying to threaten a checkmate. Rook protects, and now he does take he takes the queen. He's hitting this rook, so even if the pawn took the rook here, then he would just checkmate. All right. So after these moves, then actually black resigned because there's the threat of rook to d1 check, winning material, or just even rook takes f6. And it looks like white would get a quick mate sometime with the rook and the queen on the 7th rank, and just these 2 minor pieces, which are a little discoordinated and inactive, threatening against the queen. So this was a higher level example of a clearance. You can see that there was multiple ideas involved, but actually there was multiple clearances, and let's just review here. So the first clearance was knight takes, and that cleared this pawn away from the f5 square, and now the rook can get in. And then the second clearance was e5, clearing the way for the diagonal. Now, I really like the idea and the name of clearance because it rather implies that you're clearing the way for your piece activity, normally by sacrificing a pawn, sometimes a piece, depending. All right, so this concludes day 25 of 28 Days to Master Level Chess Tactics. I'll see you in day 26 and the final day and the final test of clearance. Thanks for watching. Don't fret if you got the solution wrong. There will be another time.